Welcome back. It's time for another edition of Ask a Sports Dietitian, where every month I select a question submitted to answer, just like I do each week on the private podcast for Field team members. This month it is Susan. She said, "Hi Gemma, I'm a 57-year-old female cycling endurance athlete. I like to compete for overall an age group in 80 to 100 mile sportive fondo races. I'm using a trainer and on the average put on 15 hours per week. I'm interested to hear your macro recommendations when it comes to older but yet still competitive athletes. For example, some say that with aging athletes, percentage of fat should be a little bit higher than with younger athletes. What about protein? Super important for aging athletes, but how much is needed versus carbohydrates? I have a science background and I listen to most of all the new recommendations, but I've found it all falls apart when you look at the needs of an aging yet still competitive female athlete." So I 100% agree with you. I think there's sometimes we can get stuck in thinking that as we're getting older that we can't still be competitive. But I think being competitive is possible at all ages, and nutrition has a big impact in the ability to be competitive, to recover, to adapt and cope with training loads. And so I work with a number of female athletes of all ages. I think my youngest is 16, my oldest is in her mid-70s at the moment, still racing and competing in age group Ironman and triathlon events. And I know this is a really frustrating answer, but it really does come down to it depends on your training. And I think where you talked about it falling apart, I think where nutrition falls apart for a lot of people because they get in that mindset that they have to eat the exact same thing every single day. But when you look at your training, that 10-15 hours of training a week, each of those days has different training goals and training needs. And as a result, we want to learn and start being proactive of how we have those training sessions. This is the key to how it doesn't fall apart. Being proactive, adding the food before, during, and after the training, like I teach in my framework, it works for people and women who are in the 50s, 60s, 70s just as effectively and efficiently as it does when you're in your 20s and your teenage years or your 30s. I think, as you said, as we get older, where our recovery isn't as fast, and so it becomes even more critical to be intentional about your food choices and particularly intentional about how you are fueling not only your training but your recovery. And so because your training is different every day, well, it should be ideally if you are trying to progress. If our training is the same every day, then we're just going to stay the same. As a result, the training is different every day, and our nutrition needs to be different each day to account for that, which is why there isn't one number that's going to suit each person, because each day will have higher or lower needs, but it really does come back down to the training that was done on that particular day and adapting it specifically around that. So when I'm looking at the nutrition for any athlete, I'm considering what you're eating on an everyday basis, which is like the quality of food, like the vitamins, the minerals, the macros, just as a baseline to stay alive. And then what you eat on training gets added on top of that, as well as your race nutrition. So if you're doing these grand fondos and events, rather than just leaving it to the day and hoping hopefully it'll be okay and just winging it, we use and we test in your training sessions what you are working with so that you go to your races, you go to those events confident and knowing that this is going to work for you. It's not a fluke. And so I've seen women of all ages, shapes and sizes, see their performance improve, see their body composition improve by applying this, but it's not from a specific number. It's going to be different each day. And each of these macronutrients, so fats, proteins, carbohydrates, they all have different reasons why they're important and why we need them. And again, they're going to differ each day around training. You might be eating anywhere from 1,800 to 3, 4, 5, 6,000 calories a day, depending on the training. But rather than going in reactively eating, we specifically add the food into the training that you're doing. What you eat before, during, and after supports the training. There is still a deficit, but it allows you to eat normally the rest of the day and not compromise your health and compromise your recovery, compromise your hormones and performance. And so the exact amount that you will need on a day-by-day basis is going to really be determined by the training, the amount, the type, the frequency of the training that you do. So your rest day recovery nutrition is going to be different to that on a day when you're on the turbo for an hour compared to a hill sprint or a hill repeat day versus like a 5-hour social with your friends. If you eat the same thing on all of those days, there's going to be days where you're not eating enough and you're underfueled, which can put you in a position of REDS or relative energy deficiency in sport. And there's going to be days that you're perhaps eating too much. And so learning how to be intentional and adapt around these and learning how what I eat today influences tomorrow is the key in order to help with that performance and help it actually stick and work for you. And for female athletes, particularly those in perimenopause or postmenopause, ensuring that you are getting enough protein, that's probably the biggest starting point that I find with a lot of the females that I work with. It's not just the total amount, it's also how that is being distributed throughout the day. And this is where science and practice, they don't always align. The research and the practice and the application from a clinical perspective doesn't always align, because the research might say, oh, it doesn't matter, the timing doesn't matter. But put it into practice. If you haven't optimized your timing of your fueling around your recovery nutrition after a training session, for example, how is that playing out in the rest of the day? Typically what I see, if there's not enough protein, there's not enough carbs, and the timing is too far apart from when you did that exercise, that's when the DOMS, the fatigue, the tiredness, just not getting out of your training what you ideally should be doing. And so as I said, I've got athletes that I work with who are in their 70s, and they're competing. And one of the things that I see very commonly amongst women is not eating enough overall. And I think a lot of times people expect me to be coming and telling them to eat less. If we aren't eating enough energy overall, but especially if we're not getting enough protein, but if we're not getting enough energy overall, then we start breaking down our muscles, because we're putting our body in a lot of stress, and that has a big impact on our health and our performance. It's something that's really important to be ensuring, are you getting enough energy as well as protein? Because if you aren't, then this is where you're not going to be getting the most out of your training session, and you're not going to be recovering, and it's going to be compromising how you are feeling, compromising how you are showing up when you go to those grand fondos. And so there's a lot of this social media pressure that women should be on these 1,200 1,500 calorie diets and normalizing them, when really that's, for most people, most women, it's significantly less than what they need to stay alive. So if you're eating these super low calorie diets, it's actually creating all the problems that people are experiencing typically, of hunger and fatigue and just no energy and yo-yo energy or whatever. If you add 10, 15 hours of training on top of that, so you're in these huge deficits, your muscle is being broken down. And there's a study that came out last year where that even with a high protein diet, women who are exercising regularly and following these 1,200, 1,600 calorie diets lost 400 grams of muscle. That's massive. 400 grams of muscle lost in 10 days. That's clinically massive. So I think the thing where that's highly concerning for me is that as we age, muscle mass can be difficult to grow, especially more so for women. And as we get older, muscle loss and muscle wastage is associated with falls and loss of independence. The first few years that I worked as a dietitian, I was in geriatric wards and rehab wards and surgical wards. And the number of times that I would see a man or a woman in their 60s, 70s, 80s have a fall and go from being incredibly independent and able to do everything on their own to being really weak and really frail and losing that muscle mass really quickly, which happens very quickly if you get sick, and happens if you're on bed rest, and happens if you are not exercising, not moving, and we can lose muscle mass really quickly. But the loss of independence and the reliance that they then had on other people to care for them and look after them was actually really heartbreaking. And I think for me, that certainly stirred up a lot of passion for me, health as well as performance. So when I'm looking at my recommendations for people, it's yes, I want to help people perform their best in their cycling or triathlon endeavors, but that's always with a background of health. So it's not, if I'm recommending something, it's usually multiple reasons behind why. There may be one reason that's forefront, but I also see how it's benefiting like general health for now and 10, 20, 30 plus years down the track. And so for me, I'm a woman in my late 30s, and I am consciously forcing more strength work into my life of what I'm doing now, because I know that is heavily associated with being stronger and healthier and having more independence as I get older. And so I'm thinking what I'm doing now, I'm not necessarily doing it for the now, it's more for the future in 20, 30, 40 years plus down the track. So I can be strong, I can be active, I can be independent in that phase of my life. And because I want to be one of those like 80, 90-year-old women that you see doing those like running around and races and stuff. Like, yeah, okay, the speed's not going to be the same as it is like when I'm in my 30s, but I still want to be competitive and doing it for me because I love it and it makes me feel good. And that's possible if we are conscious about our fueling and our health and our lifestyle now and making smart choices around the training. And it really does come back to the training. I think so many women are expecting me to be just telling them that they need to eat less when they come to me, when most of the time it's the complete opposite. I'm usually telling the women that I work with they need to eat more, but it's also more around the training, because so the problems that I see people coming to me, especially women, is like they're binge eating, they're like struggling with snacking, they're struggling with sugar, they're having all these sugar cravings. They think that's the problem. That's the aftermath. The problem is not enough food and fuel in training. You address that problem, you would address that deficiency, and those issues with the energy levels, with the sugar cravings, they miraculously go and disappear. So if you don't believe me, like, again, put it into practice and test it out. Like, I can teach you all about it in the training that I'm doing. I've got a workshop coming up about the framework, or you can join the team and there's all the videos and activities that'll show you how to do this and how to adapt this around the training that you do. But the 3 key things that I would be recommending you to focus on and prioritize as a female cyclist or a triathlete in like that peri or post-menopausal phase are, first of all, ensuring that you are getting enough energy overall to meet the demands of your just everyday life, as well as training, specifically getting enough energy for training. And that means that different days will have different energy needs. It is okay for women to be eating 2, 3, 4, 5,000 calories a day if the demands of that day, the training, are allowed. Like, I think so many women get in this restriction mindset and think, I'm eating more than 2,000 calories. Oh, that's bad. Like, no, it's neither good nor bad. It's looking at how can we optimize what you're eating around the training that you're doing. Secondly, I would be looking at your protein intake. So as you said rightly, like as we age, we need more protein, but it's not just protein overall, it's protein distribution and timing and amounts. I think I've done other podcasts in the past about protein shakes or protein, whether you should have real food or real protein. Again, that depends on the context. Protein shakes are great for convenience. They're great for like quick, something like if you've got short on time, but you drink a protein shake and you're hungry really soon afterwards, which is why I'm looking at solid food and solid protein, and particularly like breakfast. Again, if I'm looking for the clues, I'll see a lot of times people are struggling with recovery and energy levels in the morning, and I look at their breakfast, especially if it's after training in the morning, I'm like, there's not really any protein in there, or all the protein came from the oats. And so it's not a solid protein source that gives you lasting sustainability, or it's not enough to really have an impact on your recovery. And that's sort of contributing to some of the fatigue, some of the DOMs that you might be sort of experiencing. Typically, I would be aiming for most of my women to be aiming for at least 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So probably around that 120 grams of protein per day, with at least 30 grams per meal and 30 grams in recovery meals and 10, 15 grams of snack, and optimizing what they're currently doing and building it up. And the third thing I'll be prioritizing would be ensuring, are you getting enough in your baseline carbohydrate in every meal, particularly carbohydrate sources that are slower to digest, that are going to give us more steady energy levels. If you cut that out, that usually is the rebound response of why a couple of hours later you're reaching for the cookies or having energy levels where you like just need something to pick me up. If there's not enough carbohydrate as a baseline in your main meals, then that leads to some of the other issues later on the day. So I'd be looking at, are you getting enough carbs in your baseline? And then again, adding in the extra carbohydrate specifically for the training that you're doing, which comes back down to the intensity, the purpose, and the duration. And so this works for women who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s just as much as it does for women who are in their teens, their 20s, or their 30s, because it's specific to the training that you are doing and the intensity that you are doing, learning how to tweak and adjust this. And because it does depend on your training, which should be fluctuating day by day, I'm not going to give you any specific numbers to follow, because if I give you a number, it could be too much, and it also could be too little, depending on the day or the training that you're doing. My Food Framework does go into a lot more detail about and depth, and which teach you how to do this and learn this for yourself, because it isn't a case of one size fits all. It is very unique to you. And when you learn how to do it for yourself, you learn how to adapt it in real time each day according to the training that you're about to do, and make changes that suit you and your goals and your lifestyle. So thanks again for your question, Susan. Hopefully this has helped answer and clarify that. Each month on the third Tuesday, I have a live Ask a Sports Dietitian Q&A session for all the members in my field team, where you can come and ask me a question on literally anything about sports nutrition and get specific advice or nutrition recommendations. Head over to gemmasampson.com/join to learn more and to join. That's all for today. Like, subscribe, fuel your ride, and I will see you next time.